To look up unfamiliar words and to write chapter summaries at the end of the chapters.
Yeah, I did look at it.
So those are the skills. Did you guys do any of that in your study, or do you have any questions?
Did you research the author?
Yes, we were, but it said.
It kind of had a lot of
Research
words
author,
on the
look
assignment
up
for this
familiar
time.
Words and write a chapter summary. Did you research Clarence Cowsey?
There's no bad marks for not getting something done, by the way, in this group. None of that.
Just
No
blessings
guilt
when we do
allowed
it.
at my house. No guilt.
Okay.
Well,
You just don't learn something, right?
right.
It's its own punishment.
And I'm not concerned that the discussions are going to be bad. They'll just be all the better when we get more studying done, but they're not going to be bad. So, okay, let's talk about Cleon Skousen. What do we know about him?
He's amazing.
Let's see. Well, we've got a picture at home of when he was the police chief in Salt Lake City for a number of years, and I have an uncle who was a policeman. I've got a picture of Cleon Skousen and my uncle's there. My uncle was about 6'4", big guy, and so they got this big crowd in this picture in this magazine just kind of talking about Cleon Skousen. So I know he was a police chief. I mean, he was an interesting guy because he was an educator, and yet he was a police chief, the FBI. You know, he was very involved in government kinds of things as well as being an educator.
Theologian
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, he wrote
I think
a
we all
number
knew him
of
first
books.
as a theologian, right? And,
I know the 1,000 Years series.
yeah, right.
Yep, and what strikes me about him is that he was proactive. He wasn't afraid to get involved
Yeah. Oh,
and to help
yeah.
others learn. He was an educator that way, but anyway, he was a real educator. Let's just put it that way. He was very proactive in educating.
Oh, he was prolific in writing. And
Oh,
I
and he
think
was doing it until the day he died.
Yeah. We were privileged to hear him just before he died.
Yeah, within about
Speak.
a year.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah, at a special meeting that we're privileged to go to. And boy, he had just finished his last book, which you are reading now, and it is called The Cleansing of America. He had just finished it. Oh
Yeah, it
man,
hadn't
it's an
been published
earthquake.
yet.
Let me
It's
tell you.
good.
Let me tell you. It's a must read for us, you know. But he was really shaken by what he didn't claim to have visions or anything, but he felt that he'd been tremendously inspired to kind of see, after doing all the study of government, all the years he had done, to see where we are now and the forces. This was before President Obama came in, even, probably just before.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It was,
and he just really bore a testimony that we were in for some things that would be so shaking that it would be hard for any of us to stand, unless, you know.
Yeah.
So I just felt really privileged to be in that meeting that day. I don't know how you felt about it, but I really
definitely.
felt a sense of reverence and sacredness as to what he presented. So then we have a fun Cleon Skousen story. Joseph Fielding Smith and Cleon Skousen were contemporaries with each other, and when Cleon Skousen wrote his, maybe you've all heard this, Cleon Skousen wrote his 1,000 Year series.
It was the first 2,000
First 2,000 years.
it's called.
Yeah, and Joseph Fielding Smith, of course, is a church general authority at that time. So Cleon Skousen had
And a
Joseph
scholar.
Fielding Smith. Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, yes, yeah. He had Joseph Fielding Smith read his book, and then he was asked, Joseph Fielding Smith was asked later about the chronology and the things that Cleon Skousen had put in that first 2,000 Year series. And I find a few things in there a little bit, what, you know, I don't know if I go, but Joseph Fielding Smith said, I just read it, and some things
Well, he had about 3 different ways of marking things, about doctrinal, da-da-da-da, and then he had one that it was just B.S. And that stands for Brother Skousen. Which means totally his opinion, not based on
Don't worry
anything that
about
we
it.
can really tie it to, but it's just his idea. I'll leave it there and won't say any more than that.
That's great.
We have great love and respect for Cal Skousen.
Yeah.
My parents, when we were talking last week, said that my mom said she took a class from him when she was at BYU. And so they said that they thought he was compassionate, charming, and brilliant, and that he cared a lot about how people learned and asked good questions. So that's what they would say if they were here, because they said that last week.
Yeah.
The only thing that I have to add, because I don't have the experience, I never met him or heard him speak, but is that right when we had our first meeting here back in January, that next Sunday after it, I wanted to say at that meeting for God was his 100th birthday. And so I wanted to say happy birthday to him, and I forgot. So
Wow.
were he alive, he would now be 100 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
And one of the last later things he did was he started a constitutional studies group. What was it called again?
NCCS? No.
No.
The Center for
It's been
Constitutional
around for a long
Studies.
time,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it
That's,
had a real
this
effect.
was printed through that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It had a really strong effect during the Democratic presidencies, and then it kind of died out during the Republicans because everybody thought, oh, we're saved now because we got Republicans in it. No, it doesn't work that way.
Wrong
No.
again. It's the National Center for Constitutional
Yeah,
Studies.
Yeah.
Right.
let's switch gears and talk about the article that was for this time, Your Standard for Truth. I want to use that to kind of start us into the meat of the discussion. Not that anything before this hasn't been great, but to the principal part, and just share with you a little bit about what I thought was really impactful. I've read that article 3 or 4 times now between lifelong learning and then this class and preparing, and every time I do, and I read about Corrie Tenboom, or I read about her in The Hiding Place, I think that gives me a vision of where I could be. How she feels about the scriptures, specifically. It's not how I feel about the scriptures. It's, I don't,
Life's
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not to that depth.
I'm sure we'll get
As
the
she is.
opportunity.
And I'm sure part of it is because of her education, part of it is because of her situation
Circumstances.
that she was in. And in my easy, happy life, I'm not as desperate for them. And yet it's inspiring at the same time that I can learn to love the scriptures more. And that's what I get more than anything, not how valuable they are, but how I can value them. And so, I just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about, I'm going to just go under the assumption that when we talk about our Central Classic that we're all talking about the scriptures here, because I thought that was probably a safe assumption. And talk about this idea of when we study any other material outside of doctrine, that if there are true principles that we'll be able to find them in harmony with the scriptures, that's just... Because truth is truth is truth wherever you find it. And so I wanted to just discuss how maybe a few of our favorite principles or things that we find in other studies and how we've found them in the scriptures. If anyone has any thoughts about that, it's kind of a big question to spring on. Or the idea of finding truth and experiences you've had looking for them in the scriptures, or you find something and you think, oh yeah, that's like this verse. Anything like that that you can think of that we can share with the intent of building that idea of we find truth other places and we compare it with the scriptures, and that's how we know if things are true or not, if the principle's real or not.
I can start that. When I was in high school on the very comfortable conveyor belt, I picked up a book that was on my mom's shelf called Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Oh, yeah.
And I read that and just loved it. And read it again and again and again. And I actually started marking it, and then I thought, I'm marking a book. I only mark my scriptures. What am I doing? Why am I marking this book? And I started being concerned. Am I thinking this is more scriptures than scripture? You know, I just, it's my first experience of that kind of a thing. And there's still, you know, part of that book that stays with me, some quotes I remember and things like that that just stood out to me and were answers actually to some of my gospel questions that I couldn't find specific answers for in the scriptures, like specific applications for in the scriptures,
Yeah.
but that just tied it in for me, and it was a neat experience for me.
I don't know if this is too much of a twist on it, but I'm currently certifying as a nutritional therapist, which is healing with foods. And so I can apply this to health, because as I looked, there's lots of ways to go, lots of ways that people are suggesting that you improve your health. You can do the paleo diet, or you can be a vegan, or you can, do all these different ways. Eat raw, you can do all these things. And GAPS, I have high respect for the GAPS diet, but what
Yeah, boy.
I had to choose a course of study in order to do the certification. So what I let guide me was